Calli, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. Project HR is brought to you by IRI Consultants. IRI helps organizations navigate workplace challenges, improve employee engagement and productivity, manage labor relations, and implement effective communication strategies to achieve their goals. For more information, you can visit IRI at iriconsultants.com. I am Jennifer Orqua, Director of Business Development for IRI, and your host for this episode of Project HR. Now, salary secrecy has been a long-held tenet of the working world, and whether it's been explicitly stated in the employee handbook or something that was simply understood, it's clear that the time for watercooler salary speculation is coming to an end. At the time of this recording, 17 U.S. states have enacted laws around pay transparency in an attempt to address pay inequity. So today, I'm joined by Julie Calli. Julie is the president of recruitmentmarketing.com, a resource for celebrating and elevating the recruitment marketing community. She's also the author of an article titled Radical Change Towards Salary Transparency. Julie, thanks so much for joining us here on Project HR.
Great. Thank you for having me.
So I know you're super passionate about this subject, so I want to jump right in. When did this move towards transparency start, and what's motivated it?
Well, I'd say it started 60 years ago when we had the Equal Employment Act put into place, a civil rights act, saying that pay equity is equal pay for equal work for all. Mm-hmm. Well, that was 60 years ago, and we've made some progress, but not enough. So now what's happening is pay transparency. And if pay equity is about being fair in compensation, pay transparency is about the accountability to that fairness. And there's two things that are really taking place right now that are causing this change. They're intersecting together. And one is the desire for an entire generation of people that appeal towards radical transparency culture. And that has played a part. But if you combine that with the need that's being placed upon it, and that is that government is having a desire to close the pay gaps and make real change towards reducing compensation discrimination. So they need that accountability. So the people want it, and the government is saying we need to do more to make it happen.
So I want to talk a little bit about the taboo about talking about people's salaries. It's an issue on both sides of the paycheck for employers and employees. Why in the past have we been so hesitant to talk about compensation? Is this really in the rearview, or are we still hesitant to talk about it?
Well, we take the two different perspectives here, right? There's the perspective of the employer, and, truthfully, the primary reason for not disclosing has been that they've been able to keep the power of negotiation within their control, and provide comp based on their own terms. Now, companies would even make it policy in the past to not discuss compensation with others, or you may even risk being terminated, right? So there's been this fear that workers have always carried with them that this is something that's frowned upon. I'm not supposed to talk about my compensation. Mm-hmm. But by keeping compensation hidden, there is a lack of accountability towards that equity. And this leaves a lot of room for bias and discrimination that's not having any form of accountability because it's hidden. I don't think that this is the primary reason that companies keep it disclosed, is that they want to be discriminatory, but it becomes an outcome of that. Now, if you flip the table to the perspective of the employee, these have been generational norms, right? Like I grew up knowing, don't do that. You don't talk about that. Right. You don't talk about comp. And the lack of education and training and general understanding of a clear compensation philosophy within an organization leaves most employees unprepared to even handle comp transparency becoming a thing today. Mm-hmm. So as well as our own personal fears of being unprepared or that we are maybe, right, for example, be underpaid or overpaid, and the view that others may have towards that. Well, it could be that you're paid too much or not worth the value, or paid less and not as valuable. Mm-hmm. So employees have had reasons personally why they don't even want to talk about it. And then you bring the job seeker, right, into it. They're like hovering in this orbit around the employer and the employees, like saying, I want to understand how you guys pay. Mm-hmm. And they are absolutely left guessing until they become part of either getting a paycheck or given an offer as to any idea what they might be compensated working for an organization.
So, Julie, there's kind of an etiquette issue here, fair to say. You kind of alluded to it as far as a generational thing. It's not polite to talk about religion or politics or money. That's how my family was always about money. So, is that playing a role here?
Oh, same here, Jennifer. I can actually remember the moment my grandmother taught me to never talk about these things.
Hmm.
Because these are topics that will never end well in conversation
Right.
because they're packed with emotional connection and personal identity. So it's unlikely that you will change anyone's mind about the topic, and more likely that they will change their opinion of you.
Mm-hmm.
Compensation, for example, can create a sense of self-worth, and fear of being overpaid or undervalued can affect someone's personal identity, right? Thinking why someone receiving information about compensation that's not their own might cause them to say, why are you paid more than me? Or ask the question, will our relationship change, or will they resent me now they know that I get paid more than they do? Right? These are real fears that people have about their own personal identity within an organization that can be affected by a compensation discussion.
Yeah, for sure. And in your article, Radical Change Towards Salary Transparency, you addressed the impact of social media on this movement. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yes, social media. All right. We have an entire generation, which will soon become the largest, workforce generation that lives very openly and comfortably on social media with full transparency. So this is, if we think that we're going to be able to like keep the curtains closed and people can't see what's going on, employees are of this generation that just shares very openly. They share with their friends, they share with their family, they share publicly. There's even a TikTok called Salary Transparent Street, where a young woman goes around and just asks people randomly on the street, what do you do and how much are you making? And they share openly. She has millions of people liking her videos, following her, that are all just trying to get a sense of like, hey, this has been hidden for so long. What is the compensation out there?
And certainly salary sharing websites like Glassdoor have made an impact on this as well.
Yeah. So Glassdoor is what everybody always feared, right? What is Glassdoor going to say about my organization? Well, it is Glassdoor gone wild, right?
Yeah.
Out in the world, in the metaverse.
Sure.
And that's that there are things that are happening out there that you're not even aware of, because they might be conversations that are taking place behind walls or in the dark web, and that people are talking about your company. The larger your organization, the more likely they are. And there are many channels out there. People are sharing. It's becoming a tremendous effort to even attempt to monitor them all. So I don't think that any company should rest in believing that they can control what's being said. They can only influence it.
Yeah. But there are a number of really good benefits for employers who can embrace salary transparency. Let's talk a little bit about positives.
Yes. One, the first is let's close the gap, right? 60 years ago, we put in the equal employment opportunity for equal work for equal pay. 60 years later, and we still have the gap. So we need to close it, right? So if that is not a greater purpose, then, certainly what is great for employers is that they can build trust with their employees as an employer. And also consumer brand. I mean, if you're a company that sells to the consumer market, you should be thinking about how you as an employer is impacting that, because how you treat your employees has very much become part of what mainstream pays attention to and how people select what products they'll use. So that can have a big impact. But also, there's a competitive advantage to being able to do this, because people do desire radical transparency in the workplace. So that can give you a competitive advantage. It can help with retention if your own employees trust you, value you, and can understand their path towards increased compensation. That can create internal mobility. There's so many benefits to this for employers, but really this can make big impact in making a better workplace for diversity, for being, a leader perhaps in your industry that adapts to this change in a positive way. But absolutely, job seekers want it. So if you're out there struggling to attract great talent, you can attract more qualified talent likely for your organization if you're disclosing compensation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right, Julie, I'm going to take a quick sponsorship break right now. But when we return, I want to explore the pay disclosure laws currently in place and how employers can best position themselves during this time. Stay with us.
Labor relations is changing rapidly, and it can be frustrating if the tools you're using are not keeping pace. If you spend too much time searching for what you need, or you find it challenging to collaborate with your team, it's time to think about your employee communication resources in a different way. You need a labor relations platform that will help you connect with and educate employees. Proofbox solves these problems by offering a robust labor relations library of videos, e-learning, and ready-to-use websites at an affordable price. Whether educating employees or supervisors in preventive mode or in the middle of a union organizing campaign, Proofbox is like Netflix for labor relations. Learn more today at bit.ly/Proofbox and make sure your tools are keeping up with the pace of labor relations today.
I'm back now with Julie Calli, president of recruitmentmarketing.com. So Julie, let's do a quick rundown of the pay disclosure laws that are currently in place and what they mean for employers and employees that are affected by them.
Oh, yes. This is difficult for a lot of people to wrap their head around. And part of that is because every state and even cities have different laws currently. That makes it really hard to understand, like, what is happening here? What are all these changes? So I like to think about disclosure laws today in two main groups to simplify it. And that's disclosure under certain circumstances or upon request or in the job posting itself. So states right now, or shall I say localities that require disclosure upon request or certain circumstances are Connecticut, Maryland, Nevada, Cincinnati, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, so not the whole state, Rhode Island will be coming January 1st, 2023. But these are they all have different circumstances. They all have a different phase in the process in which they're disclosed. So they're completely ununiform in how they're applied. So you really need to look at the information per state to understand those. The ones that are requiring disclosure on the actual job posting are Colorado, which was the first to do that. Then New Jersey, Jersey City, New York, New York City, which is November 1st, Ithaca, New York, Westchester County, also coming November, Washington, January 1st, 2023, the whole state of Washington, and California, which is just been signed in by the governor, and I believe they're setting the date right now for when it will be mandated.
So in light of these laws, or in advance of one, obviously they seem to be on the march, what should employers be doing now to prepare for becoming more transparent?
What should you do to prepare? Well, I would say be sure your comp is equitable. I mean, do a pay equity analysis. Are you paying fairly across all your roles in your organization? You want to know where you stand. You need to know. First of all, it's the law to be equitable, so you should be. But second of all, you want to know where you stand because you really want to have data. You don't want someone sitting in a room saying, yeah, we pay fairly. You want to have the data in hand to be able to prove that. That is where the California law is going, I'd say, above and beyond where all the other laws have gone so far, is that they're actually going to require that the pay equity in your organization is disclosed to the state to create further accountability. So you're going to need it. The second is create a plan to become equitable. So after you've had that analysis, you're going to know where you stand. And either you're going to need to create a plan to become equitable, or you can feel confident that you are. So if you are, or if you have to have a plan to get there, you're going to need to work on your comms for both of these areas because either way, you're going to need it. You're going to have to prioritize your efforts and resources to comply, at least at a minimum, with the laws and the timelines provided. So that's like focus on the localized compliance and assess the impact and priority of those things first. But then you need to prepare for the future. And the future is full transparency. It's only a matter of time before it's nationalized. So don't wait for that to happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And it's going to be the expected norm of the employee and candidate market. So what will it say that you don't tell your own employees that you pay people, what you pay people in the organization? But you will tell job seekers that don't work for you. Like, you can't just rely on it being on the job because that's what you have to do by law. You are going to have to disclose that to your employees as well. Otherwise, they're not going to trust you.
That makes sense. So in the article, you also talked about a company's transparency being broken down into two distinct groups, and communication audiences, obviously internal and external. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I view that as pay transparency is one coin, right? It's the same coin. It has two sides. One side being internal, that's your own employees. And there's, we discuss a lot of those benefits to that. That's internal mobility and retention and trust and culture. And there's all these great reasons why you want to do that with your own employees. But then there's the external side. Now that, yes, it's on a job posting, right? You disclose compensation in a job posting. You might do that for the intent of reaching the job seeker. But once it's out there, it's out there for the world. So you should think about all the other people who can see that. Your own customers, maybe other vendors and providers and partners that you work with, certainly your competitors, right? That breaks off a whole nother conversation of your competitors now can see what you pay and you can see what they pay. So that's going to create some shakeup. So that's why it's really important to make sure you're keeping good communication with your internal at the same time as the external, because those things they're going to impact each other.
So let's say our organization is ready. We're ready to initiate this kind of shift within our own company. What's involved? Who's involved? What kind of process is there here?
Well, of course, HR, if you have a TA team, talent acquisition team, they're involved. Your recruitment team is involved. Marketing should also be involved, because this is where recruitment marketing is very different than regular marketing, right? There is compliance and law associated with the type of marketing we do in recruitment to ensure fair practice of hiring behaviors. So you can't just go create a cool ad, right? You got to like follow the law.
Right.
So those teams, obviously, but this can involve doing a financial analysis and of what the impact might be to compensation, because that impacts a company financially. Absolutely going to need internal comms, because there's a lot to communicate and educate on this, and it should be done very thoughtfully and well. So that's very important. You're probably going to need some technical support, because jobs in a digital era, it's a technical thing. So you can't just, take a whiteout marker and put that on the job description. You're going to actually have to find out how to do that technically. Probably need some project managers, because some of these things have a heavy level of effort. And you might even need legal counsel. So in order to mobilize all these people to understand the importance of how to create this change, you are absolutely going to need executive leadership to be educated and understand the importance of this. The work that needs to be done by organizations is significant. It is more than just simply listing the pay on a post. And I think it's being seriously underestimated by the officials and committees that are creating these mandates and setting these timelines. But most of all, by organizations themselves are not seeing the big picture here. And they're looking at this as a transaction rather than a movement towards change. And this is actually really hard.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. All right, Julie, it's time for another quick break. We'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and my guest today is Julie Calli, president of recruitmentmarketing.com. We're back. So, Julie, what considerations should employers give to preparing employees for working in a more transparent environment?
My biggest is clear communication. Have to help people set expectations. Also preparing people managers. I think, we talked about how for generations we've had a culture of like, don't talk about it. And now the people will be talking about it and they will be bringing it to the table with their managers. And I think a lot of managers have never had to prepare those skills and having those types of conversations. So there needs to be training and clarity given to people managers so they can reinforce and support the communications with the employees. And provide people logic towards pay. That's my biggest one. Because as people start to see these things, they're going to want to understand and know why. For example, there are very legitimate reasons why a company might pay someone who lives in a certain geolocation more than they do in another, right? The cost of living might be higher. And if that's the case, they're going to need to be able to explain that. It could be that it's skill value, that there's different compensation. Well, then the question people are going to ask is, well, how can I acquire those skills so I can get that compensation? That leads to conversations about, professional development and learning and development. And tenor might even be a factor why you pay people more. These are all things that people can understand if you provide the logic. But without any communication, it's just going to look unfair. Why do they get and I don't? Right. You're going to have the communication that supports what that means.
So as salaries become more and more transparent, do you think we should anticipate there'll be more job movement as people become more aware of their worth in today's market?
Oh, yes. I believe what's coming is the great migration of talent. So just expect that people are going to be asking their managers about their compensation, and managers are going to need to be prepared to handle those questions. I think it's going to come down a lot to how well an organization is prepared for those comms, how well they've prepared their people, and then ultimately the manager and how they're going to handle that situation. Because if this is poorly executed at an organization, they're going to lose out the gate. As soon as the comps start going up, people's eyes are going to be looking over the fence. And if not done well, they're going to jump quick. Shifts are going to be made on the market compensation, just being exposed. But this great migration for talent is going to lead a lot of people chasing the top, but that's not going to be sustainable and things will level off. I think it's probably going to take a few years. I actually think it's going to take a few years because it's going to take organizations some time to adapt and get themselves prepared for this, go to market strongly with it, adapt to all the changes that come into play. So things will normalize, and that's what we all hope for coming out of this with equity and fairness. But I do believe that job seekers know that money isn't everything. They care about a lot of other things, flexible work, work-life balance. So this is going to be an opportunity for companies to really look at what other value can they provide other than compensation. And the people, if it's genuine and it's authentic, people will gravitate towards those things because they know that money's not everything.
And you talked earlier about how transparency really it's creating accountability around equity. Do you think that the laws and initiatives towards transparency will close the gap on wage inequity?
Yeah, 60 years, we've made progress, but not enough. This definitely will help. I polled our audience. Now, in recruitmentmarketing.com, we have a community of people that work in doing recruitment marketing specifically. And I polled the audience and said, asking them if they feel their company should be planning towards full transparency. Not a single person voted no. Not a single one.
Interesting.
So I think that's quite telling that unanimously, nobody was opposed to it. I think if you asked every job seeker, like, do you have a problem with salary being put on jobs? Nobody would say no. So I think we all agree that this should happen. But the hard part is, how do we get there?
And your company, recruitmentmarketing.com, is a resource for the recruitment marketing community. How do you help companies in this effort to become more transparent about pay?
Well, first of all, I just love to talk to people that are in the space, in the industry. I love to hear the challenges that they're facing. And at the same time, I'm talking to a lot of people who offer solutions. So helping companies find ways to make progress towards improving the human experience in the world of work, that's what I love to do. So you can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to connect and provide guidance and resources towards adapting to change for really anything related to recruitment marketing.
And you also you host events to bring the community together. Can you talk a little bit about those?
You'll find me often speaking at conferences, on panels. But if you go to recruitmentmarketing.com and subscribe, or even follow us on our LinkedIn page, our resources are free. We're here to help. We're just putting out information to help people adapt, because the rate that things are changing, both technically, on the legal front, in our space, is so fast. I really want to help people adapt to the change and stay ahead of all the trends.
And I want to let everybody know that a link to recruitmentmarketing.com, as well as everything else that Julie mentioned, will also be included in this episode's companion guide. So be sure to unlock that today at projectionsinc.com/podcast. Right now, though, Julie, it is time for our lightning round questions. These are questions I ask of every guest of the podcast. Are you ready?
Oh boy, let's do it.
All right. Our first question is always a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about salary transparency and being open about compensation. So in your opinion, Julie, what's more valuable, for a leader to have an open door or for a company to be an open book?
Open book. And I'd say, because the larger the organization is, the less time you'll likely have to keep an open door. But if you are intentful with your communication, you can have an open book.
Very nice. All right. Speaking of books, what's the best book you've read recently?
I'd say the 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace.
All right. Very good. Next question is, what is your favorite thing about the work that you do?
My purpose is to help people find their purpose. That's often by helping companies become a mirror of how their work and purpose is reflected by others.
Interesting. All right. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
My mother told me, and I remind myself this every day: choose your battles. You cannot fight them all. And if you try, you'll lose most. So save your strength for the ones that matter, and then you'll win the war.
Very nice. Last question. Who or what inspires you?
What inspires me, I'd say, is the desire to do the right thing. The belief that I need to do both data and logic, combining that with the perspective and thoughts of others to make the right choices. My desire to go to bed at night and be proud of the choices I've made.
Oh, that's nice. Thank you so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR, Julie.
Thank you. This was wonderful.
I also want to thank those listening in. Don't forget that we took great notes on this episode for you, and you can grab those notes for free at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you're ready for your Project HR debut, our team is always looking for outstanding guests. Let us know about your expertise at projecthr@iriconsultants.com. Of course, don't forget to subscribe to Project HR. A new episode posts every Thursday. Finally, drop me a line, leave us a review, or give the show a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it for this week's episode of Project HR. Let's make it a great day at work.